If this goes on, don't panic. Bringing hope to the world through speculative fiction.
Hello and welcome to episode 8. In this episode, we will be interviewing author and professor of history, P. Djeli Clark. All right, Diane, so how are things going?
Hi, Alan. I'm doing really well. I've got a lot of projects on the go. I'm looking forward to National Novel Writing Month. I'm trying desperately in the next few days to get an edit done of the first couple of books in the series and organize it into a timeline so that I know where I'm at for where I'm writing, because I'm terrible at this stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure I'm going to make it, but I'm working on it. And I'm very excited that I'm going to be interviewing the creators of World Anvil in the next few days, and that'll be another episode, and that's very exciting for me. And as part of the Anvilite Streamer Corps, which is a World Anvil related Twitch group that I'm a part of, we're going to be doing a game competition type thing within NaNoWriMo called the Game of Tomes, where you join a house and keep track of your cumulative word count, and there are eliminations throughout the competition until it's the last house versus the undead horde, and I'm very excited about that.
That sounds super cool. And, for the timeline thing, have you considered talking to Kat at all? Her first two novels were like this weird, they were overlapping. You know what I mean? Like they happened at the same time,
that's
but the
true.
events affected each other.
You know what? I haven't, and I should. You're right, because she would know all about that, wouldn't she? She had to have something like that going in order to make that work, and it worked.
I saw her board. It was crazy. It was insane. Like she had an entire wall of it was like the crazy conspiracy meme that you see with the lines or with the yarns taped to each other. You know what I mean? And it was crazy. Yeah.
Sounds awesome. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Know what? I will do that. Thanks for the advice. Actually.
Yeah.
How are you doing?
I'm doing okay, doing the 9 to 5, hanging out with the kids, trying not to murder my neighbors, who most of are Trumpers, and
oh dear.
And I'll have little kids that run around with my little kids, so it's like we're trying to keep them separate a lot of times because they think
and you're like, if you're going to do that, at least put a damn mask on, but of course they won't do that. Yeah.
Yes. So it's been challenging, but we're doing good. We're happy that the cold air's coming, the cold weather's coming, so the kids will stop playing together. But, otherwise, same old.
Right.
Do have something I want to announce to all of our listeners. Our friend Zigzag Claiborne's new novel comes out. It'll be called Afro Puffs Are the Antennae of the Universe.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that.
And by the time this episode comes out, you'll be able to pre-order that. So everyone, you should go and check that out. It's technically a sequel to his first novel called, hang on, I have it right here. The Brothers Jetstream Leviathan. However, it is a sequel, but it's not like a direct, continuing timeline type of sequel. So you could read Afro Puffs without reading Brothers Jetstream, and that would be totally okay.
Cool.
I have his word on that as of this morning. So
nice.
Yeah. So that's all that's going on with me. I'm super excited for our guest today, though. He's pretty awesome. I've read a lot of his stuff, so I'm ready to dive in and ask him about, his world building and fantasy and horror and all this crazy stuff that he's doing. So
I haven't had the chance yet. You've recommended him to me hard, right? And I am looking at the description of his book, A Dead Djinn in Cairo, right now, and this definitely sounds like my thing. So I can't wait to learn more.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Well, when we get back, we will have Djeli with us.
Awesome.
Hey, you all know that I'm a supporter of Dreamforge magazine. You might wonder why you should support Dreamforge too. First, understand that Dreamforge is a new kind of science fiction and fantasy magazine that is looking for hopeful futures in a time when it seems hard to find that. Second, check out their magazine. The illustrations are beautiful. Personally, I was very impressed by the cover of the 3rd issue. Additionally, they have top-tier talent writing in the magazine, like Jane Linskold, Dave Weber, and Mary Soon Lee. They also have new authors to discover too. And if you're like me and read a lot on the bus, they have a portal set up for you, so you can read the magazine on your phone or tablet. There are plenty of other reasons to check them out too. You can find them at dreamforgemagazine.com. That's Dreamforgemagazine.com. All right, and we are here with Mr. P. Djeli Clark. Welcome.
Hey, guys. How are you guys doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm having a great day. How about you?
I'm good. It's a nice fall day here in New England.
Nice.
Oh, beautiful. How are the colors this year?
Oh, they're nice. They're just coming along. So I think like just within the last 2 weeks or so, everything's starting to shift. Means a lot of leaves to clean up. A lot of leaves.
Yeah, but they're so pretty.
Yeah,
it's worth it.
They're nice when they're on the trees.
Yeah, I hear that. Yeah. Yeah, it's fall here now in BC as well. Only our colors aren't quite as pretty as your area. They're nice. They're nice and they're starting to come out now. But yeah, a lot of them are ending up on the lawn along with the horse chestnuts, which are always a joy to clean up.
Yeah, same here. I mean, I've got a great huge tree that's right outside of my office window that I'm looking at right now. And it's just beautiful orange, red, gold, just classic fall stuff right there.
Brilliant.
So before we get started, let's do Djeli's bio real quick, so everybody knows who you are.
This makes sense.
Okay, great. Do you want me to do it, or you guys got bio on hand?
No,
he's got it.
Oh, great,
great. Don't worry. So today we have Fenderson Djeli Clark. He is the author of the fantasy novellas Black God's Drum and The Haunting of Tremcar 015 or 015 or 15?
015 will do.
015. That's the way that's what I've always called it, so I'm glad that you're saying that. His writing has also appeared in numerous Best of the Year anthologies, and his short story, The Secret Lives of 9 Negro Teeth of Washington, earned him both a Nebula and Locus Award. His upcoming novella, Ring Shout, was just published by Tor.com this week.
Yes. Yeah. It's out. It's in the world. Yes. You too can have one, you listeners.
Yes.
There you go. Yes.
And I actually have a story already regarding your book. So I bought it the day it came out, but I also happen to have a Nook. Okay.
Uh-huh.
And I was going to read it before this interview. I don't know if you've heard, though, but Barnes & Noble had a giant hack.
Oh, yeah. They sent me something letting me know.
Yeah. So I have not had a chance to read it. I was going to read it before this interview so I could talk to you about it, but my Nook still is not working right. And I was like, damn it. This whole week, my wife's like, are you checking again? I'm sitting there like refreshing my Nook, like went and talked to their IT department, who had like no good answers at all. And it's still not working. So I figured since that happened, we could just take a little more of a general approach to your work, since I have read most of your other work. If that's all right with you.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Fantastic. So I thought we get started talking about world building because, your stuff is more leaning fantasy. So big part of fantasy, of course, is world building.
Yeah.
And, your stuff is so deep and rich, in my opinion. You mentioned like anarchist necromancers, socialist pirates in one of your stories, right?
Yeah.
I love it already.
Candy smugglers, like things that, I don't know, I would just never think of, but are so awesome. Like, how much do you think about these things and their implications to the rest of the world? Or are you just like, that sounds cool, I'm going to go with it? Or is this like based off of your life as a historian?
Yeah, thanks for that world building. It's funny when you say it like that. I was like, yeah, that stuff sounds weird. Candy smugglers and anarcho-necromancers. Some of it comes from my life as a historian. Something comes from simply things that I've read or I've been exposed to. And, I think all of those things, I think you bring all of those things to bear when you're writing, and you never know where inspiration might show up. Who knows? I might have been, I don't know, watching some Democracy Now! Or something when anarcho-necromancers came to play. I think we sometimes don't fully even know where those things come from. But, in the creation of some of these worlds, I sometimes try to give them a bit of the familiar, because I think that works a lot with readers, right? When you're reading about steampunk pirates, and you're not expecting to hear a treatise on socialism, right? Or some little crack on it. And so I just, like to put these things all in there to give sometimes there's humor, sometimes there's a bit of world building that I haven't fully figured out yet. Like, I don't know what to do with the anarcho-necromancers, but yeah, it sounds like a cool thing for me to explore perhaps later on. Right. And so I think part of world building, what you do with world building, and I guess I'm giving this longer answer because I'm participating with right now with Nissi Shawls and K. Tempest Bradford, their work Writing the Other. And so much of it is about doing the seminar, and it's been great. And it's been interesting listening to students ask me about world building. And what I guess I try to always tell them is you just need to build about enough of your world that works with your story. Right? You're not doing a D&D campaign. So you don't need to have the world completely fleshed out. And you can always have little pieces that you haven't figured out yet, but it would be fun to go back and figure out. Your readers might find that interesting, and it's something you can come back to later.
I appreciate that immensely. That's great. I was just touching on that in a stream I did last week. Because building a world is the nano prep work, and I've kind of been streaming about that kind of content and giving suggestions, and that's exactly it, right? When you're creating, you're right, It's not a D&D campaign. A D&D campaign, you kind of have to have all of it kind of at least loosely built so that if your players decide to go off the rails, they can go do that. But you have a little bit more freedom when you're writing.
Yeah. Yeah, because your world is germane to your story, right? So if you're not going to go build up, I don't know, the southern continent in your second fantasy world and, figure out what their main imports and exports are, what their larger cultural narratives are, if you're only going to talk about them for a sentence in your story,
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, totally.
That's doing a little bit too much. Yeah.
So I'm curious, like, what happens then when you do say you get you're going to be working on your first full novel in the Dead Cairo world, or you are working on it, or maybe you're done with it. I don't know.
It's done.
Nice.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, what happens when you made this note about anarcho-necromancers, and then you're like, oh shit, though, if I do the anarcho-necromancers, that conflicts with the socialist pirates because they're actually kind of like, I don't know, and somehow and there's like this conflict between the two things. Like, how do you address that in your world building?
That's a great question, and a part of it is that's the fun, right? That's the fun of creating. And so I'll just give you just a short story here. When I did A Dead Djinn in Cairo, when I first wrote that, I wrote it just as a short story that went too long and became a novelette, and there was nowhere to publish it. And it was simply going to end up on my hard drive or in one of these online spaces where it was just going to rest there in purgatory forever. And it just so happened I sent out a tweet and I said I had this long story, and my editor at Tor at the time, Diane, she wasn't my editor at the time, but she was an editor at Tor, and she liked the idea and she said, hey, let's publish it. And before you know it, my story was on Tor.com, and that was like, whoa, this is my biggest sale ever.
Brilliant.
Right?
Brilliant.
Right.
Yeah.
But and I didn't know how it would be received. I was really nervous. I was like, I've done short stories, but this is going to be a heck of an audience. And the story did well, right? Thank you. It did well, but now people wanted more. And I didn't really have more. Right? I had the one thing because I wasn't expecting that this was going to take off. And so when it did, however, I was glad that the way I write, that I tend to create those little things that I haven't fully figured out yet about the world, right? And I lay out these little markers because when it came to, I said, okay, now I have to expand this world. I remember I sat down one day. It was actually during the summer. I was out of the country. In fact, I was in Spain of all places, right? Make it sound like really Ernest Hemingway here. I was in Spain. And I sat down. It wasn't that exciting. I sat down one weekend and I said, okay, you know what? I know this world. I know what I was doing with this world. I had some things in my head that I didn't write down. I know the larger bones of the world. Let me create a fully fleshed out timeline that explains this world. And when I did, that gave me basically, that was my guide, right? I hate going back to a D&D campaign, like your guide, the Dungeon Master's guide, became my guide. I had a full timeline now of this world. And with that there, I can figure out where anarcho-necromancers fit into this, right? I can do those things like you're talking about there, with making sure they don't contradict with other things. Or if they do, how do I explain that, right? And so, once I had to do more in the world than just a novelette, I knew I had to do a novel. I had to, be a lot more careful about those things and make sure they fit. And so the first thing I did was I went out and I tested this world by writing another short story in that world, which was The Haunting of Tremcar 015.
Cool.
Right. But that's literally the order of how that stuff happened.
So basically, aside from the initial kernel of the idea, you're doing more of a top-down than a bottom-up world-building approach. You built the whole timeline, and now you're using that as your guide for the fiction that you're creating in it. That's brilliant.
Right, right. And, and I guess that's the, maybe that's the influence of Tolkien on me, right? You create this big, large world and you say, I'm going to tell you just about one little section of this world. But I don't have a Silmarillion waiting for anyone to read. It's just odd jotted down notes. I don't have anything that convoluted.
I would say it's definitely successful here. I'm looking at, like I said, the Amazon listing for A Dead Jen in Cairo right now, right? It is number 7 currently in 90-minute science fiction and fantasy short reads.
Hey,
which,
that's great.
I've never been in the top 10. Good for you.
Yay. Yeah.
295 ratings with an average of 4.5 stars. That is fantastic.
That's fantastic. I never go and look at those things. And my wife is always, have you looked at it? And I was like, no, I don't.
No.
Yeah.
Somebody will say something horrible and it will hurt your feeling.
Yeah, exactly. Make me think like, you'll read like 100 good things and that one person will know how to get you.
Yep.
Oh gosh. Yeah. Luckily, we only have good comments so far for the podcast. So everyone keep your mean, horrible comments to yourself.
Yeah, don't read it if you don't like it. I don't know why you have to go on about it if you don't like it. Just say, I didn't like this book. It wasn't for me.
Yeah, like the people who send, I haven't had this happen yet, but they send the authors bad critiques. Like, not their critique, but other people's bad critiques. Why? What made you think this is a good idea? I'm going to send him a bad person's critique just because I want him to see what it said.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, that's just a waste of everybody's time, at least.
Yeah.
God, why? That's great. It reminds me of that story about Stephen King. He was taking a writing class and the professor failed him, and then he went and sold, I don't know, it's probably like one of his early novels or something. It was like Cujo or something. I'm sure I'm getting the details of this screwed up. Anyway, he went and sold it, right, as a novel, and then he photocopied the check and sent it to the professor, like, screw you. Obviously, I know what I'm doing,
Now, see, that's different. That's fine.
That might have been Carrie, right? Because Carrie is an interesting case. He pitched that to, like, a whole bunch of publishers and finally gave up on it and tossed it in the trash. And his wife literally picked the manuscript up out of the trash and submitted it to, I think it was Macmillan. And then he got offered a 6-figure contract.
Wow.
So, yeah.
And back then at that, wow.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's a heck of a story. I mean, those are great stories, right? Those are the kind of stories, like, before I had a book contract, that I used to sit around the fire and let me tell you stories about how people get contracts. Those are the kind of great stories I wanted to hear. Yeah.
Well, I mean, yours is pretty good. I mean, I randomly sent out a tweet to the world, right? And then
Oh yeah, that was it. Was yeah. I have a perfect. Like I said, I have one of those stories where I was not gonna. I remember I said, "Is this a little forward? Is this going to sound a little desperate?" And I tell people this story, and I tell writers this story. I said, like, I sent that out, and I took the chance, right? And luckily, a lot of things had to fall into place. That Diana was there. She's into steampunk. She was into diverse ideas of steampunk. And I said, this is a steampunk story, but it's not set in Victoria in England or something. It's set in a alternate world, 1912 Cairo. And there's a lady detective who wears suits. And she was like, oh, that's that I like. I like that. Let me see what that looks like. And I sent it to her. And I don't think I heard back from her for like 4 months. Like I almost forgot about it.
Yeah.
And then she got back to me. She said, we want to buy this. And I was like, what? Okay.
It's advice that you keep hearing, and it's hard for people who are struggling to make that connection.
Mm-hmm.
Newer authors trying to break in, it's hard for them to hear. But the thing is, persistence. Keep putting stuff out there. You never know what's going to break through.
Right.
A lot of it is luck, but you can't, if you don't create the opportunities for luck to find you, it won't.
Yeah, that's a lot of it. I mean, that's a lot of it. I mean, my path here was not simple. Like I've been writing for a long time,
mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a point where nothing was getting published. And then I think I just started getting a few short stories published like in 2010. And then A Dead Djinn comes along in 2016. And it's really at that point that things picked up. And so, I often get asked, like, do you want to do this class on how to do this? And I was like, I just got here. I'm just trying to figure it out myself, right? And the way it happened, like you said, was a lot of luck, a lot of fortune. Like I said, I don't know if Diana was not there at tour, I don't know if another editor would have picked that up, right? This diverse story, and taking that chance and said, you know what? This story is not a typical story, but I'm going to take the chance that readers want to see this. I don't know if that's the case, right? It's just why it's so important. We always say that, you don't simply have diversity in the realm of authors, but you need it behind the scenes at publishing houses and what have you, so that, you have different people seeing things that might appeal to them rather than, the same story about, a dwarf, a ranger, and 3 elves who meet in a tavern. That'll be all of fantasy forever.
Yeah. I'm so glad they do that too. And I mean, for me, science fiction and fantasy is this continual search for, like, just imaginative weirdness. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's what I just love about so much. And having steampunk in Cairo instead of Victorian England, which I've read about 1,000 of those. You know what I mean? It's just so much different and more interesting, and I don't know, it just gives you that one little bit further edge of just weirdness. I'm gonna go back to the generic weirdness,
maybe
here, what's that? Uniqueness. Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Something that something that's not the norm. Like you said, I've read a lot of good steampunk set in Victorian England. I have. They're really good. But there's a big world beyond that island. There's just a lot. There's just a lot that can be done, and I'm just always happy. I'll still read the stuff in Victorian England, but I also want to see all this other stuff. I've given a lot to Victorian England. I think I can look someplace else.
Absolutely. Like there's Japan, there's Russia, there's all of Africa, an entire continent. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's so many places you can touch on. Yeah.
With an amazing diversity of cultures that nobody ever touches, And I'm starting to see it more now, and I'm really glad of that.
Right. And I'll say this, I think a lot of people were touching it. It was just not going to be published, right?
There is that.
And I always remember, and I don't know who this author is. I don't remember his name. Perhaps I don't want to say his name exactly, but when the Black God's Drums came out, and the cover of the Black God's Drums is a 13, 14-year-old black girl that's on the front cover in a uniform, and there are airships about. And I think the front cover did a lot, just to get just did a lot of work for Black readers and younger readers who'd never seen a cover like this. I didn't certainly see a cover like this when I was growing up. So it just had that appeal. And, I remember when it came out, someone wrote me and said, I put out a story where they wanted to do a cover like this just like 7 years ago. And they would not. The publishing world was like, no, I can't do a cover like that. It won't sell. So it was luck almost that I happened to publish at this time.
I remember in the 80s, I discovered Octavia Butler and her Xenogenesis series.
Yeah.
Right. Because I was reading everything science fiction that I could find in the library at the time. And I was mad because I got through, I think, about a third or half of the first book. And I was reading the character description of Lilith, the protagonist. And I'm like, who is this white woman on the cover of the book? This is not what the character looks like. What the hell is this shit? I was mad.
Right.
And that's been going on for forever,
Yeah. Like Ursula Le Guin talks about it, right? Where she had the same problem with her book covers, in a sense, right? With how her characters in Earthsea. But yeah, it was, unfortunately, this is what you kind of get this groupthink where the editors think, we only have this. These are the people who are looking at this, and so we have to appeal just to them. And they kind of decide that no one wants to see anything different.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, people, let me tell you, you need to check out Djeli's work. Toddy Thompson. Oh my God, Toddy Thompson.
Yes. Oh, great work.
Oh, he's so great. And Saad Hussein. You guys are three of my favorite writers right now, and you're all just great. And honestly, I would compare you a lot to Saad Hussein. I mean, you guys have a lot of similar things going on. One thing in particular is you both have a lot of humor in your work. Just to give an example, I mean, you have basically Dead Jin in Cairo starts out with a dick joke.
Okay.
That's one way to put it. Yeah, I hadn't thought of it like that, but you just put it out there, so sure.
I mean, but it does, the Jin's dead. He's laying there naked, and the guy comments immediately about, his parts, and and it kind of goes from there. But
I like that because that's how people act.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It would be like everybody can see it, right? So,
right.
Yeah.
Right.
And it tied into this notion of, Fatma, the main character. It's 1912, and she's the first woman on this, within this ministry that investigates these kinds of things. And the men around her are, they're awkward. Some of them are hostile. Some of them are simply awkward and nervous. And she says in there, like, they show their awkwardness in weird ways. And this was one of them, right? Like, you could have said 1,000 other things, but you think maybe this is how I break the ice by saying something completely inappropriate, right? And so she was like, yeah. And I got that because I've spoken to women who have been in those positions. And they would say, like, that joke or that comment would never have happened if I wasn't who I was.
Yep.
Right? And it's out of a weird awkwardness and bizarreness and just a non-self-awareness or sometimes cruel intent that somebody decides that this is the route they're going to go. So all of that went into that little paragraph. Yeah.
No, it really did. It really did. It revealed a lot about the society that the characters are living in. I mean, and so it had an effect other than just to be funny. But you have that kind of stuff running all throughout your work, Yeah. Another example, Haunting of Tram 015, you have them you have the two main characters kind of dressing up as women, sort of, but they're like really awkward and like kind of bumbling around,
Yeah.
Very like Three Stooges kind of vibe, right? and it was funny, but then, and it also said a lot about what was going on in the world, because then you could kind of use that as a reflection of everyone else's opinion, It was really well done. And so I'm wondering, because I feel like there's a lot of humor missing in a lot of other people's works. What do you think that brings to your work?
A part of like why I have humor is that I guess it's also my personality that, I'll do a little snark and I'll do a little joke even in my teaching or class or what have you. And it's just knowing how much should be in there when you have a serious thing going on and where it works. And so it's always just a matter of knowing, where to do that humor and where not to. And sometimes the humor can help if what you're talking about is rather dark, right?
Yes.
And so I know that with not Black God's Drums, but with Ring Shout, there are these interspersed bits of humor, sometimes dark humor, and it's partly because so much of the rest of it is dark. I do want to make it this fantasy adventure where there are also these little that people still joke and people still do all of these things, even in the face of all these other terrible events happening. And so, I always throw that in there. And I think in the Dead Jinn world, so I don't have a name for that world yet. So I'm just going to call it the Dead Jinn world. I saw someone call it that online. So that's something, by the way, people, I don't have names for these things. So whatever you call it online, I may end up calling it. So it's called the Dead Jinn world. In there, the stories just kind of lent themselves to having a bit of humor. I mean, it's almost like you're already in a bit of absurdity, right? That you're having a world where there's magic and there's steampunk, and there are times when you can take it very seriously, but this time I decided, no, there's humor in here because this stuff is happening. And I think the second story, especially the Haunting of Tremcar 015, that was really my attempt again to play in this world a bit. And I just wanted to I remember when I thought up the idea, I was like, should I do Fatma again? Should I do someone else? I said, no, let me do someone else who's also in the ministry and who's kind of in Fatma's shadow, right? And kind of wants that kind of glory. And of course, this is going to be a male character, but I didn't want to make him like a villain. I want to make him likable, even though he's flawed.
Yeah.
Right. And that he has this jealousy, but I still wanted to make the people say, okay, I can still like this guy because I can relate to him because he means well, even if, he does have these problems. And it does cause him to at times end up in these bumbling situations with a candy smuggling ring.
Yes. Which is also awesome and hilarious in its own right. So another thing I noticed, you have a tendency to put social issues in all of your work, everything I've read anyway, that I can think of, whether it be a woman detective dressing in men's clothes or the socialist pirates. So that was the first story I read of yours. It was, I'm trying to think of the name.
With the Golden Risha, I think.
With the Golden Risha, yes.
Yeah.
And I'm reading this, and it's just like this, very like a soul and sorcery or sword and sorcery kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, you start describing these pirates who are basically socialists. And I'm like, oh my God, this is awesome. Yeah. I love this. This is great, And, but, so whether it's a background type of thing like that, or whether it's very much in a forefront, like Ring Shout, or the women getting their equal rights in the background of Tram 015. You always have like this social kind of situation or social change going on there.
Yeah.
Would you talk about that for a minute? Like, why do you feel like you need to push that out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was something, we get into these things constantly on Twitter or something where somebody will point out like, oh, I don't want my stories to be political, right? And they'll say something really absurd, like, I don't want Star Trek to be political. Like, you don't Star Trek, my dude. You have never Star Trek in your entire life. Or they'll say,
that hurt my brain.
I know, exactly. Don't make my Star Wars political. The one about fighting space Nazis? That one?
Yeah, that's not political. Okay, whatever.
Yeah, and so people make these really absurd comments at times with things that were blatantly political, but they simply also told you these wonderful stories, right? But they were, in the end of the day, they had politics there. And I think some of the best stories, again, give you these bits of politics because that's real life, right? We live in a world immersed in those things. You never really can escape it, right? I'll argue that not only is like Lord of the Rings, for instance, we know that there's certainly subtle political themes there, right? Tolkien is talking about ecology with his talking trees. He's talking about the horrors of his own experience in World War I. And so there are all of these things in there. And I just sometimes find in sci-fi and fantasy, we want it both ways, right? We want people to be able to say, oh no, that story isn't just about orcs and hobbits. You see, there are all these deep things. But then if it's politics we don't like, then it's like, oh, do we have to be political? Right? It can't.
Yeah.
It's like you can't have it both ways. Either you
No.
like that science fiction and fantasy tends to do this all the time. I don't care whether you're talking about Shelley's Frankenstein or Dracula, what have you, that they're always using these things, whether it's the, H.G. Wells and the Time Machine or anything, right? War of the Worlds, that it's, talking about colonialism. There's always some of that wrapped up in the storytelling. And so when I do my storytelling, first and foremost, I tend to want to tell a story. But I tend to always look at what's happening in the background, right? What is happening in this world? What does it mean if my characters are Black women, for instance? How do they exist in this world? How does this world treat them? I can't ignore any of that. And so those things end up in the story. And when you look at things like A Dead Djinn in Cairo, I mean, first and foremost, again, it's a story I just wanted to tell. But if you peel back the layers, it is an anti-colonial story. The entire point in many ways is that the British never colonized Egypt and things go differently. Right.
Sure.
And so it's inherently political just from the jump. Right. Just the fact that I have altered the timeline of what happens and I've altered it in this way. I am making a political stance. Everything else on there is just gravy. Right. But it started off that way. And so, I guess, like I said, I don't sometimes I want to I'm going to make a political point. And other times I'm telling a story where the politics just comes along for a ride. Like with the Golden Risha, for instance. I wanted to talk about pirates, and I wanted to give a different view of pirates that I've seen some historians do, where they speak of pirates. I suppose I don't want to romanticize pirates. They're still pirates. But they speak of piracy, for instance, within an understanding of how pirates tend to operate outside of the regular social systems and economic systems. And if a good example of this, I mean, with the Golden Risha was inspired both by our old 17th century pirates as well as the pirates of Somalia, right? That were in the news. Remember, that was like a big thing for a while. All right, they made whole movies, right? Yep. It's my ship now. I'm the captain now, I think is a lie. And so with the Golden Risha, in fact, the crew there are supposed to be Somali, right? I use a name for a sultanate that existed in what is modern day Somalia, Adal. I use that as a term to describe the people on there, but they're supposed to be, in a sense, Somali pirates, right? And I'm pulling on some of the politics of Somali pirates, people who pushed out of their fishing and regular things. They now take to literally levying a tax upon all these large ships that are now going through their waterways, right? Yeah. Because they've been pushed out of their regular work. And so, yeah, all of that went in there in that story. And I tend to do that, I think, often. And I think most authors do if they are honest with themselves.
I'd agree completely.
Yeah.
I also really like that sympathetic view of the situation. History is often written by the victors. Who's the villain? Well, that depends on who wrote the book, doesn't it?
Often, yes.
Yeah.
And also, how do you? So many science fiction and fantasy people go on and on about world building, but then how do you world build without politics and economics? Because
exactly. Yeah.
That's literally the world, right?
Yeah.
except for the rocks and shit.
Right. Exactly. And so, whenever people do this, I think they're not being honest with themselves when they say they don't want politics in their speculative fiction. I'm sorry. The entire plot of Sauron against the men of the West and what have you, that was extremely political.
Yep.
Seems Sauron had a political agenda at hand. Made you realize it.
Oh, that's funny. So another thing I wanted to ask you about, even though your work is very steampunk fantasy feel to it, you tend to wander into horror quite a bit.
Yeah.
So, what do you just really like horror? Do you like having horror bad guys? Or what's your purpose there? Is that just the way your brain works?
I think part of it is the way my brain works. Is I'm trying to think up monsters and things that would really frighten you. And I think I'm also influenced by horror that I've read, right? That I've seen horror used in this way, where it can fit into your sci-fi, you can fit into your fantasy. It doesn't have to sit out by itself. And so, like, what I write never tends to be, I suppose, direct horror. There's always, elements of there's always some magic, supernatural, and all these other things in there as well. I've never written the, just maniac who butchers young virgins at camp type thing, right?
Sure.
But I do pull from it because I think I've been influenced with it, throughout my life. Like I was just on another podcast talking about, we were talking about what were our first horror books, and I hadn't thought of it, but it was like you were talking about early Stephen King, and for me it was like Clive Barker's some of his short stories, like the Volumes of Blood, and I'd forgotten how much I was reading those things when I was younger, and how much that is likely gone into, again, you sometimes don't even know where your creativity comes from, but it's influenced how I think. Even that guy, H.P. Lovecraft, right? Who that very problematic guy. even if you don't read him directly, his ideas have influenced everything. So you're watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and there's Lovecraft in there, and you're going to pick that up, right? Even if you don't pick it up directly from him, and it's going to have an influence on you.
I was just talking to my friend yesterday. We were talking about cyberpunk and how it's almost it's almost silly to say cyberpunk is a subgenre now, because really it's in all science fiction. Like, you know what I mean? It's so diffused that it's almost just a non-thing. And I feel kind of Lovecraft is very similar to that in a lot of ways. And I'm sitting here and now I'm wondering, why do we even bother to call it like something Lovecraftian? We don't call anything Gibsonian because it's...
Right. That's a good point. I mean? Yeah. Some people have said just use cosmic horror or things like that. And that makes a good point. Yeah. And I think, the only reason I ever say it is just to make sure that I can say something terrible about him. So...
I love it.
So, or to let people know I am purposely subverting this, like how Matt Ruff does with Lovecraft Country, right? I'm going to name this after this, and then I'm going to do things to subvert this guy
Good
and
stuff.
his thoughts completely.
Good stuff. That's great.
I read your essay on Lovecraft just the other day, and man, you went at him, and I think you did a great job, honestly. I've never bothered to read his letters, and wow.
Yeah. Something else, ain't it? Something else.
Yeah, that is something else. Holy shit.
Yeah, and I always knew. I was like, aha, I thought so.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So do you feel like I'm going to call it a reclamation. Do you feel like the reclamation of Lovecraftian ideas is going well? Or do you think those ideas can ever be completely separated from Lovecraft?
I mean, that's a good question. I don't know. I think we've had a lot of that, right? And I think that often speaks so much beyond Lovecraft. We don't just have to talk about him. What it's like to be at times a marginalized person in, who's interested in genre. That you're going to come across these negative things or these things that make you uncomfortable. And they've just always been there. Like I said, I grew up on Tolkien, but it was like the third reading probably during my high school. I was like, hey, why does he keep saying black fellows? And why are all the bad guys are brown and black from the East? And what is this in Far Harad, these black men with faces like trolls and red tongues? What? And you are reading that stuff. You love it. You're inspired by it. And you're going to find problems with it. You love reading about Drizzt, the dark elf, but wow, you can't help but come away from that. So let's see, all of the black-skinned elves are bad, except for a few good ones. You live this double existence where you like this stuff, it influences you, but it also has all these problems for you. And so I say that to say that when you create, often what you end up doing as a marginalized person is you end up trying to reclaim that stuff, subvert that stuff, and you're in some senses trying to deal with it like you always have been your whole life, right? Appreciating it, liking it, and yet realizing that at times it's insulting and harmful to you. And so how do you create things now that aren't harmful for those like you and for those who will be reading things later? And so, how's it going? It seems to be it seems to be an in thing right now. And that's great. Because I think what's great about the subversion is it also brings to light why people are trying to subvert it, right? So what's great with having something like Lovecraft Country on the screen is people say, well, people who hadn't heard of Lovecraft or, like you said, may not have read those letters, they get introduced to it now, right? And so there's a way that in the subversion and the reclaiming, it exposes that original part so that no longer is it simply you, the marginalized person, wrestling with these things. Everyone now has to wrestle with it, right? And rethink it. And I think that's great.
I totally feel you there. For me, reading New Wave is like this. You get gems like Samuel Delaney, right?
Yeah.
But you also get so I'm obviously, I guess not so obviously, I am female, I identify as female, and I'm LGBTQ, right? So reading the New Wave is a crapshoot because most of them hated women and they hated gay people. Right.
Yeah.
And, it's, I like the ideas around technology and, there was some really good stuff in that era, but there's also it feels like I just came out of a slime pit.
Right.
Know?
Exactly. What really happens though, when you see, and what happens is like you grew up with that and you didn't really have much alternatives at times.
Right.
But when you see the alternatives, it's like suddenly like you can't go back and simply accept that.
Yes.
And the alternatives probably make you want different. You want to see different. It's not enough anymore. Your horizons have been expanded. Your expectations are more, and so, yeah.
I remember how excited I was about the Blue Sword because it was a girl who was the fantasy hero.
Right. Yeah.
So we are getting close on time, but we have a few more questions.
Sure.
I have a few more questions that I'd like to ask you. So this next one is for purely selfish reasons. I am curious what your pitch for the next Dead Djinn book was, because I'm excited to read it.
The novel. Man, what was my pitch? I can't remember. I was like, I'm trying to think of, I'll give you, I suppose I'll come up with a pitch now. I can't remember if I had an exact pitch. Because I kind of was working on it almost in secret because it was before I had an agent. And at the same time, I was getting an agent, but I didn't have a contract yet with Tor on this. I was just kind of sending them novellas, right? And so I think my agent kind of let it out the bag. Like, he's finishing up the novel. And Diane at Tor at the time, oh, there's a novel? And so in that sense, I didn't have to pitch it because everything was just happening at the same time. But I suppose if I did, it's we get to see Fatma again. The story goes back to her. There is, and I guess the way I will say it is Al-Jahiz has returned, right? This is the figure who, in A Dead Djinn in Cairo, in the world building, this is the figure that has altered the world, right? By basically causing magic and djinn to enter the world, which has completely rewritten how world history goes, right? And has made Egypt and Cairo this world power, allowed them to push out the British and what have you. And there is someone who claims to be Al-Jahiz anyway, who has returned, and he's sowing chaos in Cairo. And now, Fatma and several other members of this Egyptian ministry, they now are in this race against time to figure out if this imposter is the real Al-Jahiz or if he's a real person or if he's an imposter, and what this means. And so, yeah, that's a terrible pitch, but again, I didn't have to pitch it. That's a rambling pitch. Your pitch should always be, I tell this to people now, that's a terrible pitch. Your pitch should be enough so that you can say it on the way up on an elevator going to the third floor, right? Yeah. So that was not a good pitch, but that's basically the story.
Do you know anyone who's actually good at elevator pitches? Because I have yet to meet the writer that can do them. And everyone
you're
says,
only
you
good
need
at
to do it. Nobody does it.
If you've created it, to me. Like, like I was able to pitch Ring Shout. Ring Shout was something I pitched, right? And I was like, D.W. Griffith is a sorcerer, and he wants to unleash hell on Earth, right? But there's a heroine, and she has a magic sword, and it's a Southern Gothic fantasy, and so I was able to pitch that one. I was able to pitch easy, probably because I had to, because I was like, the story is so weird. I've got to be able to grab people with it. Yeah,
Gotcha.
No, I think it's awesome. And I'm super excited for the new Dead Djinn book because I know exactly what you're talking about, and I'm psyched.
Yeah, it's called A Master of Djinn, and people can go to Tor.com. I believe they have a book cover reveal up by now. And
there's
they have
also
an
a
excerpt.
Pre-order, it looks like, available on Amazon here.
And they have a whole partial chapter excerpt on there that can be read. And even better, they have a much better blurb than that rambling bit that I just did to tell you what the book is about. Because that was terrible in my attempt to sell my book, and they do a much better job.
Oh, no worries. All right, so I'm going to steal a question that Kat often asks. Sometimes she asks, what do you wish people would ask you about, but they never do?
Oh, that's a good one. What do I want them to ask me about? I'm not coming here such a blank slate. And I'm like, go for it. And I'm like, anything's on the table. I suppose with, let's just say with Ring Shout, I've done a lot of things on Ring Shout, and I wish people would ask me more about the Night Doctors.
Okay.
You have to have read Ring Shout to know fully what the Night Doctors are. And so anybody who's read Ring Shout, you should ask me about the Night Doctors. just putting that out there for anyone who's read it.
Well, now you have to tell us a little bit about the Night Doctors.
Yeah.
So the Night Doctors are these, I don't want to give it away, but they make their appearance in Ring Shout. And they are, let's just say their origins are in African-American Southern folklore that I picked up from these narratives of ex-slaves that were recorded, written down in the late 1920s and the early 1930s. And it was just an interesting bit of folklore. I think that they're supposed to be these beings that tend to snatch away people and experiment on them. Ooh. And for instance, if you ever seen the people who've seen Get Out, in the very beginning, but a character is about to be snatched away. And first thing I thought when I saw that was, oh, that was a Night Doctors, right? These mysterious people in African-American folklore who snatch Black people away and do terrible things to them. And the origins of it likely comes out of slavery with often the bodies of enslaved people when they died would sometimes be sold to medical schools and dug up or what have you. And this folklore arose out of that. And so I decided I wanted to explore that a bit further. And actually, I think it was those stories about Night Doctors that put me on the path to doing Ring Shout, though I didn't know that at the time. In fact, I wrote a short story just about Night Doctors before I'd even thought up Ring Shout in full. And what I ended up doing with Ring Shout was I folded elements of that story into Ring Shout. So I did a crossover. Things that I thought could only be done in comic books, right? I was like, can I do this? Can I cross over one story into another? Is that possible? I thought only comic books did this, but I managed to do it. And so readers should know that there is a short story that's just about Night Doctors, and it's just about that one character from the Ring Shout. And that short story is going to come out in November.
Nice. Well,
so
I'm looking forward to that.
Those who've read Ring Shout, they get to hear a bit more about the Night Doctors.
Whenever Barnes & Noble gets their act together, I will have read Ring Shout, so I'll be nice and ready for that one. So we've got one last question, and we ask this question for all of our guests. What is giving you hope right now?
Oh, man. Polls!
Yes, I will agree with you on that.
I'm encouraged too.
Polls. It doesn't feel like 2016. It just feels a little different, right? It feels more like 2018 right now. And so polls, I just want it to be over with already. It's what I want it to be. So that is giving me hope. But I mean, also, I think that what's giving me hope is that people are also seem more hopeful, right? People seem ready to fight more than anything. And we're getting really political now. And so that's giving
cool.
me,
this is the show, man.
Yeah, that is giving me a sense of hope. And I'm hoping that, come sometime in early November, I can watch. Remember in Lord of the Rings, in the third one, when Sauron's when they showed you his tower crumble. That's what I want.
Yes.
I want to see Sauron's tower crumble. I'm hoping I can look forward to that. So that's good.
The Trump Tower, right?
I've said no names.
That's okay. I said it. It's all good.
Yeah.
Oh man. Oh no, I feel you on all that stuff. I am just like psychically exhausted, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it's a lot. Yep. But I would say, like, I mean, I just feel that it's a different place, and I hope I'm correct that we're simply in a different place right now. It's
it feels different to me too. I'm also crossing my fingers.
Yeah, take nothing for granted, but it feels different, and I don't think you could. I don't think one thing I said. I don't think we could have possibly hoped. You couldn't hope for better polls. If you like polls, you couldn't. You can't do anything else with them. They're as good as they're going to be. And who knew?
I totally agree. That's awesome. Okay, well, great. Thanks for answering that question. It's and don't worry about getting political. We, that's kind of part of our shtick here.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
I mean, we had Malka Older on. I mean, we basically talked about politics the entire time.
Yeah.
That and children's cartoons. I don't know.
That's great. Where do we find you out in the World Wide Web? That's the other thing.
Oh, yeah, sure. So I tend to keep it simple. You just look up Djeli Clark, my name, and you can find me. www.pjelyclark.com is my main website. On Twitter, I'm at Djeli Clark. So pretty simple to find. And on Instagram, I'm at Djeli Clark if you want to see me post pictures about food.
and just to clarify, that Djeli is spelled DJ
ELI. Yep.
Fantastic. And what else do you have coming out soon? So you've kind of talked about your short story in November. You've talked a little bit about the new Dead Jin book. I don't think we have. Do you have a date on the new Dead Jin book?
The novel is due out in May 2021.
Nice,
brilliant.
Yep.
And you can pre-order it now. It's there. I'm looking at it right now. So yeah.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you showing up. You have a ton of interviews going on this weekend and all week and next week, or I don't know. I mean, I saw you tweeting about your schedule, and it's crazy.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff.
All right. Well, thanks so much for coming on, like I was saying.
Thank you.
You were a pleasure to talk to and so interesting, and it was great.
Yes, thank you so much.
No, this was good.
So that was our interview with Djeli Clark. That was so awesome. He was great, right?
I loved him. He's so interesting. Yeah, and he's not afraid to say what he thinks, which I appreciate. That's
not
good.
at all. Not at all. You have to read Ring Shout. I mean, seriously, I don't know if I'm sure you've seen the cover floating around. It's
just looked at it. I'm like, yes, this will be so cathartic.
Yes, right. It is so it's so in your face, politically speaking. But it's kind of sad that even has to be a political thing. Why is that a political thing? These people, it shouldn't be. These people should be hiding.
Okay, I'm going to say it outright, and you can feel free to cut it later if you decide that you don't want to say that. But the fact is, Antifa stands for anti-fascist. I don't see the problem here. Why is that a problem?
Well, don't worry about it. I was tweeting the other day. My grandfather was part of the Antifa because during World War II, he trained fighter pilots how to do math so that they could fly their planes correctly. Okay? He was a math teacher for pilots who blew up fascists. There you go.
Both my grandfathers, all my great uncles, right? My grandmother was a Polish Ashkenazi Jew who left the year that World War II came to Poland, right?
Wow.
So, I don't have any problems with anti-fascism, okay?
Yeah, absolutely. No, me neither.
Yeah.
So what stuck out to you?
Just, he's so knowledgeable about how politics and the personal all relate and how it connects to changing circumstances as established by changing events. Like, this is something that's kind of a pet peeve of mine in world building, where people will introduce something like, bam, here there's magic, and all of a sudden there's jinn and elementals in the world, and nothing changes. History progresses like it was going to. Why would it do that? That makes none sense, you know?
Right. Or it has to be explained.
Yeah.
If they want to do that, they have to explain why it stayed that way.
Yes, exactly. Right? And obviously he does not do that. He believes in, you change a circumstance and there are going to be consequences, and what those consequences are, and how that won't change too. Because obviously some things aren't changing, right? Fatma runs into discrimination issues. So, that's also relevant. So this is great. And I'm really looking forward to sinking my teeth into his work.
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. The world building stuff really jumped out to me. I always like to talk about world building, but we don't do it enough, it seems like, on the podcast. But to me, and this is maybe just more of an example of how my brain is, but everything is connected to politics. Everything is connected to the economy, which is actually kind of a false term anyway, but in our current understanding of an economy. But also, just everything is connected, period. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And to say that there are no politics in a story is to be like, I don't know, like, there's no water in the air because the air isn't water. Well, yes, there is. You know what I mean? It's like, you just can't see it.
I agree with you, right? I thought about this during the interview, but I didn't want to derail the discussion. But this is a perfect place, right? Okay, so when people talk about there being no politics in what they're reading, what it means is that the politics that they're reading supports their pre-existing worldview as they imagine it. They're looking at what they think is the default, and that's political in and of itself, right? Campbell made constant decisions, and this is one of the reasons why science fiction has been plagued with these problematic tendencies, right? He consciously made decisions to, men were the protagonists, and, rah-rah Western civilization, which of course we often know as a dog whistle for racism, right? And, rah-rah humanity is going to conquer space like, white people have conquered whatever, and that's political. That was a political decision. Those were his politics. And because he was such a major influence on the publishing world during the golden age of science fiction, this has been something that has been existing in science fiction for forever. And people who read a lot of science fiction where they say, I don't want politics, it's because that's what they're reading. And they view that as the default.
Yeah, totally agree.
I resent that it's the default. I don't want it to be. And so my politics are different.
I totally agree. And I, frankly, just not to get too far off the handle here, but I don't even like the term golden age of science fiction, because I think the golden age is now.
You know what? We certainly are in a renaissance, aren't we? Right? This is a beautiful time for science fiction. There's so many writers out there who are doing so many interesting things. It's impossible to keep up. And I love that. I've got stuff to read for the next 20 years. It's going to be great.
Yes. If I stopped caring about anything new right now, it would take me at least, 10, 15, 20 years to read everything.
Completely.
And it would all be great. There's just so much stuff. Speaking of that, do you have any book recommendations?
Oh, geez. No, you know what? I'm terrible in that I haven't had time to read, right? Because I've been working so hard on getting my writing in order at the moment.
I know.
Right? And I apologize for that. I'm terrible, but I'm still working my way through the big book of science fiction, and there's some excellent stories in there that you can see how they've influenced the genre, and that's important to know, I think. Plus, there's stuff in there that sticks with you, so I'm still recommending that, but it's a big text. I'm halfway through it.
Oh, yeah. That's something that I would read for a year. I mean...
Yeah.
my reading habits are like, I usually have one main thing that I'm reading, one thing that I'm listening to, and then I usually have one or two large anthologies that I kind of pick up, read one or two stories, put it back down for a couple weeks, pick it back up, read one or two stories, and those last me for at least a year usually. I'm doing the Ursula Le Guin collection right now.
Cool.
And yeah, I'm like, probably a quarter of the way through it. And nothing I've read so far has even been fantasy or science fiction yet. It's been all more of a realistic style stuff. But that's actually not on my recommendations list, though. I mean, not because it's bad, just because I'm not done with it yet.
Fair enough.
I do want to talk about Nine Step Station and The Forest God by Jamie Lackey. So let me start with Nine Step Station, Season 2, as Serial Box calls it. This was published this year in 2020. I can't remember if you were on the episode where I reviewed the first...
Actually I was, but it was an episode of Alan and Jeremy versus Sci-Fi, and you were interviewing Kat and I at the time.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
That seems like a million years ago now.
And I was interested then. So yes, do tell me how things are unfolding.
Oh, yeah, okay. So, in case you don't remember, listeners never listen to Alan and Jeremy versus Science Fiction, or don't remember, it's about a police station in Tokyo, Japan in the year 2033. The main characters include a Japanese cop and an American peacekeeper that has been assigned as the cop's partner in an attempt at diplomacy because China has attacked Japan and is now trying to take over part of Japan. So, of course, the United States steps in and tries to prevent that, prevent any further aggressions, I guess. And it's basically near future, very cyberpunk-ish, like if William Gibson was writing a political thriller that took place in 10 years, you know.
Cool.
And mixed with your favorite serialized buddy cop show. So now in season 2, we, have this nice little thriller going on. It's been kicked into gear. It's picking up kind of in the middle. The two main characters are still super engaging and awesome. They layer in a new level of political intrigue. A member of a local gang is made an honorary cop. Kind of a long backstory there, but you also have the two main characters questioning each other's loyalties based on the end of the first season. And, if you like the political aspect of it, that is really intensified. Now, as far as the mystery aspect of it, I kind of found the mysteries a little less intriguing than the first season. I don't know if that's because I'm more used to the world, or what the reasoning is, but I do think the political aspects make up for it. And if you're familiar with Malka Older's writing, then, it's kind of what you expect. All of her stuff is very global, very political thriller-ish, right?
Right.
So if you're willing to dive into the story a little deeper, you can definitely find some interesting commentary on privacy and surveillance. I would say that's one of the main focuses there. And so if you enjoyed the first season, I would definitely recommend you to come back to this season. The second one I want to talk about is The Forest God by Jamie Lackey, which is published by Air and Nothing Press in 2020 as well.
Air and Nothingness Press.
Oh, what did I say? Air and Nothing?
You did. Yeah.
It's funny because every time I search them, I type in Air and Nothing Press for some reason instead of Air and Nothingness.
I just want you to get it right. They were willing to publish one of my stories, so, I gotta give them shout out. So this is cool.
Totally fair.
And Jamie is an amazing writer. I can't wait to hear about this.
Oh, she's phenomenal. I say this every time I bring up Jamie too, is she's super underrated, and I'm always trying to promote her stuff. Because
she is not getting the attention she deserves.
Absolutely not. I think that's partially because she does mostly short fiction, and you know how it is, short fiction is very under-publicized, but is a great, fun little novella, maybe novelette. I'm not really sure on the length there. How do I describe it? I describe it as a shot of warm liquor at the end of a sleepy day, which I think is pretty accurate. It's part fantasy, part romance. It follows an apprentice witch and a lordling, both of whom are struggling to come to grips with their identities and what it means to grow up in a village next to this forest where the forest god resides, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's very heartwarming, very trope smashing, which I really enjoyed.
Good stuff.
And gave a nice shot of hope, when we're all recovering from the brutality of life and stories like Game of Thrones and The Walking Dead.
Truth.
So take a look into that if you're interested in hope, light fantasy, and the Forest God, which also happens to be a bunny rabbit.
That's amazing. I'm so going to check this out now. I am so done with grimdark, I have to tell you. There is some great grimdark work out there, right? I've got nothing against it per se, but because we've had this glut of it and the real world has been so shitty, right? I really need things to give me hope and joy right now. So I'm definitely down for that. That sounds great.
Yeah, no, it's a super fast, super easy, super light read, and it's just fun. And I don't know, I guess how they describe some thrillers as cozies or cozy mysteries.
Sure.
It has that feel to it where you're like, oh, you're never like super stressed out about what's going to happen, but it's still engaging though.
I like cozy mysteries. They're a guilty pleasure of mine, so that's excellent. Yeah.
And so we learned something about Diane.
We have, you bet. Actually, mysteries of any kind are kind of my guilty pleasure. I read a lot of them, so yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, but I like the cozies. I think they're good. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Love it. So that's all I've got for this podcast. So, if everybody out there is interested in supporting us, just share us with your friends on Facebook or Twitter. We do have a Patreon. You can find that at patreon.com/ifthisgoeson. We have a whole bunch of different levels there. Actually, our guest today was voted on by our Patreon members.
Yep.
We put up a bunch of different names, and we said, hey, we'd like to bring one of these people on the next episode. Which one would you be most interested on? And they voted on Djeli Clark. And so, you could be a part of that too. We are also currently doing a book giveaway for our Patreon members. Geez, I've got them all sitting right here beside me, and honestly, I'm looking forward to getting them out of my office. So sign up, win some books, choose some of our guests. There's other things in there. You can sponsor other people to be Patreon members and get some of these benefits as well. But please go and check that out. Thanks for listening, and I guess we'll see you next time.
Yeah. Good luck, everybody. See you next time.
If This Goes On, Don't Panic is edited by Alan Bailey with production by Soundmaiden. Our theme music is by Father Flamethrower. Additional music is by Christopher Snydrowski, and outro music by Sable Aradia. Intro by Dave Robinson. A special thanks to our guest, Djeli Clark. Thanks for supporting us, and we'll see you again soon.